Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is John Hundreiser, and I'm a policy analyst for the City of Chicago Film Office, which is a division of DCASE, aka the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. I'd like to thank the director of the Chicago Film Office, Kwame Amoku, for tasking me with this and letting me run with it, and also for Tavri Crouch's expert programming support. Couldn't have done this without her. And for the support of the rest of the film office, Betsy Grace and Tim Olson, for their continuous support, and to Commissioner Mark Kelly of DCASE and Mayor Lightfoot of the City of Chicago. This is an introductory conversation. This will be the first of a series of green panels. And this first one, we are focusing on sustainability in production, keeping the sets green. We have an amazing group on this panel ready to discuss this fun and very important topic. So please send your questions in the chat if you have any in advance. We will be taking 15 minutes at the end of this 45-minute panel to answer questions, and anything that we don't get to today will be in the show notes that you can find in the description on our YouTube page sometime next week. Please follow the YouTube page for DCASE Chicago Film Office to keep tabs on this event and all future events for green panels and other events the Chicago Film Office is hosting. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Megan Conway of the Delta Institute, Chicago.
Thanks so much, John, and thanks everyone for joining and hopping on today, giving up some of your afternoon to talk about sustainability. My name is Megan Conway, and as John mentioned, I work for the Delta Institute. We are a nonprofit organization based in Chicago that works with partners across the Midwest to address complex environmental challenges and support community resiliency. One of our focus areas at Delta is reducing the amount of waste sent to landfills by working with municipalities, counties, and businesses to develop management plans and strategies for waste and materials, as well as implement pilot programs and policies for food scraps and building materials. One of these projects is our current work with the City of Chicago Mayor's Office and Department of Streets and Sanitation to establish existing conditions and develop a holistic strategy to reimagine how Chicago manages waste and materials by increasing opportunities for reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting, while maximizing economic, environmental, and equity benefits for Chicago's residents. The waste strategy documents are currently being finalized and should be publicly available in the next few weeks, so definitely stay tuned for exciting updates on how the city is prioritizing materials management and moving right away into implementation of these strategies. So waste is just one component of sustainability, and it can be a really complex problem with lots of stakeholders, but also provides really significant opportunities for impact. So I'm going to quickly move through the next few slides to set the stage for the scale of the waste problem, both nationally and locally, and why this issue is so important, and then pass it over to my co-panelists to talk about specific and actionable strategies and opportunities to improve sustainability in film and TV production, including through waste reduction. The first category of material I'll touch on is municipal solid waste. This is kind of your typical, what you imagine as household trash. Nationally, as individuals, we generate an average of 4.9 pounds of waste per person every single day. At the city scale, Chicago's residences, businesses, and institutions generated over 3 million tons of MSW last year. We only capture about a third of that material through recycling and composting nationwide. And in Chicago households, we've seen a stable amount of waste generation over the past decade, but actually decreased recycling year over year. Another important waste category is food scraps or wasted food. And this picture is from a recycling facility where thankfully it was destined for composting instead of landfills, but all of this healthy food would have been much better served actually feeding people or even animals. And on a national scale, EPA estimates that 103 million tons of wasted food just like this was generated in 2018. Food and other organics not only contribute significant greenhouse gas emissions when landfilled, but this is happening while almost 1 in 4 people in the Chicago metropolitan area were estimated to experience food insecurity last year. The last major category I'll touch on today is construction and demolition debris, or building materials. This is typically the largest portion of materials generated, 600 million tons nationally in 2018, and includes building materials like wood, concrete, metals, and drywall, as well as items like appliances and fixtures from construction and demolition of buildings and larger infrastructure projects like roadway construction and roadway repairs. While this is something that we typically encounter less on a day-to-day scale than MSW and food waste, it can have a really huge impact. The amount of material from the demolition of a single home can be equal to the amount of waste an individual generates over an entire lifetime. So incorporating practices like deconstruction and building material reuse on a broader scale can amplify other waste reduction initiatives. And finally, I want to touch on a few of the additional factors that make waste reduction and how we manage materials such an important issue in the Chicago region and across the country. Economic costs and opportunities are huge with materials management. There's both the direct cost of throwing things away into landfills, as well as the opportunity cost and value of those materials themselves that are being thrown away. And there's also significant opportunity for job growth as materials are reused, recycled, composted, and otherwise kept in the local economy. From an environmental and public health and equity perspective, there's the fact that we can't continue landfilling forever. In recent years, 4 of the 8 landfills in the Chicago area have closed, leaving 4 remaining with an average life expectancy of just over 12 years. Greenhouse gases contributing to climate change are generated from materials in landfills and also through the collection, hauling, and transport of waste. There's also a significant climate impact to continuing to extract new materials to replace items thrown away. And the EPA has a model called WARM that can help to quantify emissions reductions with different material management to help reach climate goals. There's also both historical and present day equity and environmental justice considerations to how and where we manage materials and who has access to waste diversion services. This map on the screen overlays waste infrastructure in Chicago with the Air Quality and Health Sensitivity Index and highlights the need to protect vulnerable populations through rethinking materials management. So with that, thank you for sticking with me through all of that information and kind of highlighting the downside. I'm really excited to pass back over to John and the rest of the panel to shift the conversation from identifying the problem to implementing potential solutions.
Thank you so much, Megan, for those facts and statistics. They're mind-boggling. Is there somewhere that we can follow the Delta Institute? We will include these in the show notes, but if you can give us some information right now, that would be great.
Absolutely. Our website is delta-institute.org. We can be found on Twitter at Delta Great Lakes and Instagram at Delta Institute. Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, Megan. And that it's a great general overview for the plan and the city of Chicago. And we're definitely going to be touching more on some of those topics in some of the panels that will follow this one. But for now, I want to know, how does this relate to the film and TV industry? How can we apply this on sets or at home, or are they interchangeable or what? I think we'd all like to know. And we have an expert, our next expert on the panel, Emily O'Brien from Earth Angel, New York. Take it away.
Thank you so much, John. So delighted to be here, and thank you to the Chicago Film Office and all of these wonderful esteemed panelists joining me today to talk about sustainability in production. I think that it's a really timely topic, and of course it's really important to kind of illustrate that this does have an intersection, right? Entertainment and the environment, there is an intersection here, and I think a lot of the general public don't always see that intersection, and so I want to sort of talk about what that looks like a bit more. For just a bit of background on myself, I am a filmmaker by training turned environmental entrepreneur. So shortly after graduating from NYU's film program, I started to work in the industry and realized that there was an exorbitant amount of waste involved in just the day-to-day physical production. And it was right around the time when all the major studios and the Producers Guild of America started to create some kind of standard best practices around what it means to go green on a set. And so I was hired in 2011 as an environmental steward on my first feature film production, and then gradually over time tried to grow those solutions to all types of productions. So we work with feature films, television series, commercial advertising productions, et cetera. And we're based in New York, but we also work in Los Angeles and Atlanta as well. And so for just to throw some quick facts at you about what the impact of the industry actually is. So a single production can average, this is a feature film, long form length production that is, can average around 1,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent, produce up to 250 tons of waste over the course of the show. And it can also accumulate over 64,000 single-use plastic water bottles. So these numbers are pretty staggering. Of course, if you add it up times the amount of productions and the amount of content that's currently being produced, not only here in the States, but around the entire world. But some of the challenges that have always existed for our industry that are very unique are the fact that we're a traveling circus and we're always on the go, right? So having sort of these permanent fixtures and structures that we might see in certain office buildings or arenas or other types of industries that are really adapting to zero waste, we have to create things that are a lot more mobile so that we can adapt to the fact that we're always on the go. We're also an industry of freelancers. So we have different groups of people who kind of rotate around different productions, right? So that means that we're constantly having to educate. There's always something new. We can't assume that everyone is, on the same spectrum of sustainability and awareness. And so there's always that element of education that needs to be present. We also don't have a ton of industry-wide analysis and publicly available data to be able to present baselines and show people this is what the impact is, here's how we're reducing it. And so that lack of publicly available data definitely inhibits the motivation to try to reduce those numbers. And then last but not least, I want to mention a sort of psychological barrier that's been pretty prevalent in our industry, which is just that it's this concept that I like to refer to of sort of like cinematic immunity, right? That we're making art and this is such an important calling that we often forget that has an impact and an influence on the outside world, right? We might feel like when we're on set, we're in this bubble and it's not impacting the outside world, but it 100% is, and trying to illustrate those, connections for different folks and how we have a responsibility to be good stewards to our communities wherever we're filming. So there's a few organizations I want to mention that have been spearheading this for a long time. First is the Green Production Guide. You can look it up at greenproductionguide.com. It's an incredible list of resources that have best practices guides broken down by department. So you can see, here's what catering can do to adapt to more sustainable production practices. Here's what electric department can do. There's also carbon calculator tools. And if you're just sort of starting out and you want to know the basics, it's a phenomenal resource to tap into. And this was started by a group of producers that founded a committee called the Producers Guild of America Green Committee. And so they've been really active in trying to spread this messaging and these resources to the industry. And then I just want to quickly touch on sort of what those categories of impact really are and zero in on that. So we have a few different areas of how our industry is creating environmental impact. First of all, of course, we generate emissions, right? And so we need to be responsible and accounting, doing the carbon accounting, metric tracking for what those emissions are. We produce a ton of waste, so we have to look at how do we reduce that waste and also divert that waste as well. The energy consumption that it takes to power our sets can often be quite high and demanding. We also, as we said, being a traveling circus, we have an enormous transportation footprint as well. So the amount of fuel that has to go into our equipment trucks, or any of the transpo vans that are moving around crew members, to the flights that are flown, right, to get actors to and from sets, whatever that might look like. And then we also have to look at the sort of supply chain and sourcing side of things, right? Like, how are we getting the sustainable products into production supply chains as well? So just to quickly, there's a lot to go into with these different things, but I'm just going to quickly tap into some pro tips for each of those categories. First, with carbon emissions, there's a lot of different ways that you can track your emissions. And so I recommend the Green Production Guide. I also recommend, there's a tool called Albert in the UK. And if you're not familiar with them, they have another really great tool that the industry also utilizes. So really just starting with the bare bones of like, this is what basic elements go into a carbon calculator, and educating yourself on that is really the first place to start when it comes to carbon emissions. When it comes to waste reduction and diversion, as Megan pointed out, it's a complicated topic that we won't, get into the nitty gritty of, but you want to make sure that you're working with credible waste hauling companies, right, that can provide diversion reports that actually illustrate how much you recycled, how much you composted, how much construction and demolition waste you generated. And this is really important because the film industry is like a microcosm of so many industries. And so we produce every type of waste, every type, you name it, from construction to textiles to electronics, etc. So working with those credible waste haulers, setting up really clear stream systems. We have a very clear color-coded system and signage, and there's more resources on this too, on these websites that I mentioned that you can go to look more into that. And then, of course, with the transportation side of things, we always want to do things like prioritizing electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles when we can. How can we reduce the amount of fuel consumption? How can we prioritize LED lighting packages and going towards vendors that supply those types of products that we really need to be investing in, that have the energy efficiency needs? And then in the transportation side of things, we talked about hybrids, energy, so we covered that. And then lastly, the thing I really want to leave you with is the education piece. It's so important that the entire crew is aware of what's happening when it comes to sustainability. So you can do things like set a meeting, right, in the very beginning with all of your department heads that say, like, we're going to make these efforts to be sustainable. How can different departments contribute to this? Make sure people have the resources they need. You can send out memos that have like, these are the waste protocols that we're following per the different waste hauling companies that we're working with. We also do like games and programs to try to motivate and entice people. A little friendly competition goes a long way, and giving prizes for green crew members can really help kind of raise the bar in that capacity. So like I said, it's a really complex and in-depth topic, but I hope those are some quick tips that are helpful for folks to take away. And again, really grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today on this timely topic. And John, I will pass it back along to you.
Emily, thank you so much. Amazing information. Thank you for the tips and the links. For our audience, if you didn't catch those links and you're interested, they will be in the show notes. Just check the YouTube page early next week. I would like to introduce our next guest. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily. I would like to introduce our next guest, Michael Kaliski of Good Planet Innovation, Los Angeles.
Yes, thanks, Sean. And yes, very happy to be here. I love Chicago. I'm based in Los Angeles, but like Emily, we work all over the United States. In fact, we're building a hub in Chicago for Good Planet Innovation. Quick background, launched Good Planet Innovation 10 years ago with the idea of shifting film, television, and advertising production to zero waste practices as a standard. our vision is in a couple of years, we're not even going to talk about sustainable production. It's just going to be production. Think about if you had a stunt. You wouldn't say like, oh, we had this stunt last week and it was a totally safe production. We had like a pad and we had a stuntman and cables. It was totally safe. It was great. Of course it was safe, So that's kind of where we're heading with that. And we not only have been helping productions, go zero waste and net carbon neutral, but also affecting what happens on screen. Because as Emily said, we have our industry has a real effect around the world, not only in terms of how people see the behind the scenes and the practices, but also what happens on screen. So to build on some of Emily's points, planning is so important on all levels. So at the script level, do you really need to shoot in 18 different countries, or do you really need to fly to various places, or can it be done in a different way? I was just on a call earlier this morning about some companies that are starting to use plates from like the Arctic. Instead of, getting a cruise ship up there, they're actually going to plate the Arctic behind a cruise ship so they don't have to use all that fuel to get the cruise ship there. So there's a lot of creative things you can do in the planning phase to reduce your footprint, and whatever's left, it is important to calculate and offset in terms of carbon. You don't want to just offset and feel like you're okay. That's like what you do after you've reduced as much as possible. On the waste front, same thing. It's like, you could have a bunch of single-use plastic water bottles and recycle them all. That's not the way to be sustainable. So you want to go with reusables. If you have to use single-use, go with aluminum over plastic. Fun fact, not so fun fact, 92% of all plastic ends up in landfill or oceans. Fun fact, 75% of all the aluminum ever created since the 19th century is still in circulation, which is kind of mind-blowing. So that just shows you the difference there. Even in this time of COVID, you can be sustainable with the way you, for example, a lot of productions went to single-use plastic utensils wrapped in plastic. Well, you can go with bamboo wrapped in paper. We like to have everything that's associated with food be either on, with reusables, or if it has to be single-use, all compostable, so people can put all the compostable things in that bin. And we found that actually on sets, composting is one of the biggest things you can do to reduce your waste. 70% of the things that crew create is compostable outside of art department and sets and such. So, one of the other things that is important to note is environmental impact affects poorer communities and people of color in a way that's out of balance with how it affects everyone else. This really becomes an issue of social justice as well. And so it's really the importance of this. It's not just a nice to have thing. It's really important to get involved with this and to reduce your footprint as much as you possibly can on your production. And I think that is pretty much all I have in my notes. Oh, well, good. I didn't talk about Green the Bid. Green the Bid is a new organization with a lot of resources that are, free to access. It's geared towards the advertising industry, but there's a lot of stuff in there for any producer. Just like the Green Production Guide, which is a fantastic resource. Green the Bid also offers a lot of memos and signage and checklists and things to do to help make your productions more sustainable. We launched that last year to shift the advertising industry to zero waste and net carbon neutral practices, and it's really booming. We've got major brands. We have over 100 companies have signed up, big brands, ad agencies, and production companies, and vendors. And what we were finding with Good Planet was that there was oftentimes a breakdown in communication between stakeholders. So you'd have, production companies not wanting to put this line item in their bid because they were afraid that would make them less competitive with the other people bidding for the job. You'd have agencies feeling like the client's not going to go for it. And then you'd have brands that were not concerned about the cost that much. They were concerned that it wouldn't get done right and they would look bad. And so by breaking down these barriers of these silos, we're finding that we were able to dispel all these myths. And now the brands are pledging to pay for this. The ad agencies are advocating and protecting that line item, and production companies are pledging to put that line item in. And this also inspires vendors to be a little more bold in their purchasing. So rental houses investing in electric generators or electric trucks, caterers pushing more of a plant-based menu, which is by the way, just one of the best things you can do for the environment is go switch to a plant-based diet. Highly recommend that to everybody. Healthier for you, healthier for the planet, and I'm sure the animals will appreciate not being killed. So anyway, yeah, that's so that's about it for me, John. You can find Green the Bid at greenthebid.earth and also on social media under Green the Bid. And Good Planet is goodplanet.green. And I think you'll post everything else in the chat or in the description, right?
Absolutely, and anything that's not already in there will be there by early next week.
Awesome.
Thank you, Michael, so much. The mind-blowing nuggets of information just keep coming. Bring it, panel. It's truly fascinating. And I'm sorry, Emily, where did you say that we could follow you on social?
You can find us at earthangel.nyc is our website, and at earthangelsets on social, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Great. Thank you so much. So we started off with a local expert, a consultant on the industry, and then we heard from each of the coasts that are active participants and experts in the TV and film industry. And now we're going to bring it back to Chicago to hear from our final panelist, Hannah Soto, who is the head and CEO of production for Gray House Productions.
Thank you so much, John. I am thrilled to be here, and especially with such a well-respected co-panelist. I couldn't say anything that they've said any better. So what I really want to focus on is the implementation of it. What do we do next? Whether you're thinking about sustainability for the first time, or you've been asking yourself that question for a long time, and you just don't know what to do next. So what I really want to say is when you think about where to start, it's about making an impact one step at a time. It's about doing the small things over and over and over. I started thinking about sustainability in early 2019. And it started with saying we use a lot of plastic water bottles on set. I'm seeing these half full water bottles and nobody knows if they've drank out of that one. And it was just really wasteful. So I did not start off saying I want to have a sustainability movement or to be a leader in that that change coming to production. And then it's grown over the last few years. So I've put together our top 6 considerations where to start. So we've talked a lot about composting. Towards the end of my deck here, I have some local Chicago composting to recommend. But this is an incredibly easy thing to start. I was shocked at how much I made this a big beast to tackle. And the reality is that there are companies that will do pickups. They're for productions of any size. We do it at our own studio. So small crews, big crews, if you want a recurring long form for a film production or just one-off when you have shoots, it doesn't need to be an all or nothing. COVID safety, we've talked a lot about making sure that you are not forgetting sustainability when you keep safety top of mind. So anything like making sure that you discourage the use of gloves, even from a COVID perspective, they actually give a false sense of security. You want to purchase plastic-free shields. make sure you're using an EPA registered cleaning with lower environmental impact. You actually can also recycle PPE through TerraCycle and make that something that because you can't recycle that traditionally. With single-use plastic, all of the panelists have talked about this. You want to refuse single-use. That could be in bags, in bottles. We use a water dispenser that's been super. And at this point, since we've been doing it for so many years, all of our team knows to just bring their own water bottle. And then we have extras if anybody happens to forget. But reusable, also think about tablecloths. You can have a reusable tablecloth. You can reuse in green catering, finding a green catering partner that not only thinks about sustainable farming practices, but locally sourced food, reusable chafing dishes, and also just even gifting reusable silverware to your team, encouraging them to bring their own. Again, as Michael said, you can compost those materials. You just want to make sure that it's commercial composting, which the resource I'm going to share shortly does offer commercial composting, and it can handle something. Whereas if you were doing composting in your own backyard, typically you can't handle that. Carbon footprint, again, all of the panelists have talked about that. This, as Michael said, should be a step that you take after saying as much as you can to reduce. Carbon footprint and calculating that was something, again, I felt really like it was this big daunting thing to figure out, and it's not that hard. There are a plethora of resources, so encouraging you, again, just take one small step at a time. And then donations, you can donate food, props, clothing, but also you can rehome something. Is there the potential to rent something from a colleague instead of needing to purchase it yourself? Share your resources. We truly are in this better together. Even if you talk with your art department, how can we build this set with repurpose in mind? Like, start there rather than thinking about it on your tear down day and, oh, where should we do this? How can we be sustainable? Next, I want to talk about little changes or big difference. Again, I didn't have the mindset to go out and make a big sustainability movement. It started with water bottles, then tablecloths, composting, carbon offsetting. Our next big thing is switching to all LED lights later this year, but it's those small things that are really going to have a large impact. So the exciting part I have here is to share some resources, some Chicago specific, some nationwide. So the company we use for composting is Collective Resource. They collect an average of 20 tons per week. So they have really changed not only for production, the restaurant industry. They will schedule pickups. So they make it very easy. You can get large bins, you can get small 5-gallon buckets. We took time to train our PAs, and they are able to oversee that. And a lot of our team gets really excited. They're telling other production companies, are you composting? The very first set that we composted, it was a 7-day shoot with 75 crew. And at the end of it, we had less than 1 bag of trash because we recycled or composted everything. And to think about that year over year, company over company across the world, the impact is amazing. So really encourage if you do one thing today, call a composting company. Another is a green certified restaurant. We love Big Delicious Planet for our catering. Not only is their food delicious, but they have very sustainable practices. They are one of the greenest catering companies in the entire world. Everyone has already mentioned Green Production Guide. This is actually where I started many years ago. They have phenomenal signage, resources. The theme I really believe in this is that you don't need to recreate the wheel. We also have some national resources. Obviously, both Emily at Earth Angel, Michael at Good Planet Innovation are phenomenal resources on both coasts, and in Atlanta and soon here in Chicago. Michael, we're very excited. But there's also Green the Bid. We're a proud ambassador of Green the Bid. They have phenomenal resources. They give a list of the next 5 things you can do. They give memos that you can share with your crew. They help with communication to clients about how to account for something in a bid. Coach Cycle is an amazing partner we've used on the West Coast, and they actually will come to set. They'll handle your recycling, composting, and really a seamless partner. And AICP, their new bid form does include the Sustainable Practices on line 139, and that was in partnership with Green the Bid. So we don't have to worry about clients being unprepared to pay for the cost of sustainability. That's now an expectation. So next steps, again, as I said, I really want to focus on the action, like what can we do today? And you take those small steps over and over and over. So I mentioned Green the Bid has a sheet with the top 5 things you can do. So getting rid of your single-use plastics, eliminating unnecessary travel. I think COVID and everything with Unreal Engine has only proved the potential there in years to come. Number 3 is tackle food waste. 4 is going digital, and number 5 is offset carbon use. And if you want to read more about that, greenthebid.earth is the place to go. And lastly, I just want to say, remember that we're in this together. We are better together. Harbor Media, which is our sister company, is really about rising the tide. A rising tide lifts all the boats. And so we want to give resources that are free. If you have a question that's not answered in the show notes, you can send me a message. Anybody on our team is more than happy to be generous with the resources with what we've learned. We don't pretend to have figured it all out. And the goal is not perfection. The goal is one step forward. And that makes it feel a lot less daunting. So thank you, John, for having us, to my fellow panelists, and to our participants for taking the time to show up and lean in and want to do the work to see the change, because it does start with each of us doing one step at a time.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's truly amazing. The information that you guys covered, the ground you covered today on just this introductory conversation. And that's just been a little over 30 minutes. It's fascinating. It really is. Hannah, is there somewhere where we can follow you, keep tabs?
Yes, so Gray House you can find on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn at Gray House Productions, which is plural, grayhouseproductions.com. For anybody that does the Clubhouse game, I'm on Hello Hannah Soto, and I've really enjoyed the education and sharing of resources on that relatively new platform as well.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and thank you to all of our panelists. We are going to open up the floor for questions right now. If anyone does have questions, please send them into the chat. We do have a couple. One of them, I think, has been mostly covered. Hannah, you did touch upon this quite a bit, COVID, sustainability, but a member in our audience did ask, how to handle reduction of their carbon footprint during COVID compliance. So, I mean, if there's anything else that you want to add on to this, Hannah, or if any of the other panelists have anything to say about, navigating sustainability through COVID for our audience.
I would actually say that COVID has inherently helped with the carbon footprint. We're traveling less. People are working locally. They're partnering with local teams. We were just producing a shoot yesterday in Brooklyn, and I stayed here. We worked with a local team. And so those options are going to be more normalized. I don't know if anybody else has something to add to that.
Yeah, I agree with Hannah. And what's great about, a little silver lining of this very challenging year is that we've learned that we can do productions with less people flying, with more remote technologies have been developed for this purpose. And so while production, as it comes back there, the flying will come back a little bit, but it won't come back, I think, as full force as it was. And with more and more companies measuring their carbon footprint, there's that saying, like, that which is measured is managed. So when people realize how much impact their flights have, you're going to see a lot less of that. And no idling practices are becoming standard. And it just it's better for your health too. I mean, who wants to be breathing in all these fumes from trucks on set? Same with generators. You know, there's a lot of there's a company, for example, in Vancouver called Portable Electric that are creating these electric generators. They're available in New York and in Los Angeles, and hopefully we can get some into Chicago. But they're quiet. You know, so sound department loves that. They can be put closer to set, so your footprint is smaller, your actual physical footprint, and they're not stinky and carbon emitting.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Michael and Hannah have said, and I think like with everything, there's trade-offs, you know, and certainly the fewer flights that are being flown is a big, you know, helpful element to the reduction of our carbon footprint. We're also seeing paperless solutions being adapted to so much more quickly than they were previously adapted to, mainly because a lot of, you know, studios are sort of just like mandating we're moving into paperless technology now. So the adaptation to digital workflows was really accelerated in that sense. But I do think that there's still battles that we're battling too. You know, the rise of single-use items. Like we had done so much great work to move into reusables. And, you know, there was a bit of a rollback to go lean more heavily into single use, but that's where we've tried to have at least more sustainable single use options. As you mentioned, Michael, like, can we have the aluminum bottles over plastic, you know, prioritizing the bamboo cutlery over the plastic. So there are options out there, you know, depending on, you know, what your COVID compliance measures look like. And, you know, even if we can't necessarily go full reusable in some cases, you know, there are ways to still mitigate the plastic use.
Thank you so much, Michael, Emily, Hannah, for those comments. We have another question. Our next question is, are there best practices that can be done by the studios that have multiple productions?
I can take this question. Yes, absolutely. I think the studios and the sound stages actually have an enormous role to play in the transition to sustainable production, because they are really the infrastructure for our industry in so many levels. I think, you know, there are certainly examples of some stages that I think are really adapting to these processes really quickly. You know, things like, can you switch to renewable energy? You know, I think is a really key one right out of the gate, like talking to, you know, whoever your municipal energy supplier is, and if there's options to switch, really prioritizing that, you know, up front. I think incentivizing, when you have multiple productions shooting at your facilities, incentivizing them to choose the sustainable option, right? So this can look like, if they're using less power, you know, can they see, you know, some type of reduction in their fee, for example? Or if they're using more power than the threshold, maybe there's a surcharge for that too, right? Like that, it can go both ways. You know, looking at waste infrastructure and having that, you know, built in a way so that you can individually track the actual productions, you know, production A's footprint versus production B's footprint. This is always something we try to encourage at the soundstage level. So rather than having one big 30-yard dumpster everyone's dumping into, having designated containers for each production, because then it's easier to say, okay, production A, you're generating 10 times more waste than production B. Again, like maybe a surcharge element comes in so that it's incentivized to have that reduction. We also have sound stages that have built green roofs and installed solar panels on their roofs and like have really gone above and beyond. So there's all types of elements that sound stages can get involved with these initiatives. And in fact, I would say they're an integral stakeholder to seeing the transition really happen in the holistic way that we're looking for.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on the fine points Emily made there, there's also, when there's multiple productions that a studio's working on or on a soundstage, there's also a lot of opportunities for material exchange. You know, you don't have to rebuild a flat from scratch. You can say like, okay, this production's done with all this material. can it be repurposed on the next production coming up or the next production in the neighboring soundstage. Also, the studios in their physical plant can build in water refill stations so that the crew always knows where they can refill their bottles because it's built into the infrastructure of the location. So the more of that, the better.
Thank you both for that information. I know Megan is downloading all this information because she's going to incorporate it into the master plan.
Absolutely.
And we do have another interesting question here. We have an audience member that's wondering if there are any universities, either in the U.S. or abroad, that contemplate these sustainable production practices in education. This audience member, Maria, is a film student in Spain, and this is the reason that she's asking. It's a very good question.
I just got an email from a student yesterday that was just interested in learning more about Good Planet innovation, and he said he was studying film with an emphasis on sustainable filmmaking, and I was like, right on. Traditionally it hasn't been, we've done like a guest lecture on the subject for film schools, but I think that they're increasingly adding that programming. I don't know specific universities that are known for that yet. I don't know, Emily, do you know any schools that are really pushing that curriculum?
Yeah, I know the major film schools have been having conversations about this for a while. NYU, my alma mater, is talking about building sustainability into the curriculum as well, actually building it into the student thesis films, sort of like production books. So when you hand in your production book, not only are you handing in, your budget and your script and your whatever, but you're also handing in your sustainability plan. And I think that, seeing things like that, where it's being integrated into the student filmmaking process, right? Because then students are learning that, like, well, this is the way that films are made, right? And then they enter the industry after that, and this is how they've been taught. So then they carry out those practices. I think that there's, enormous potential for that. So I know there's also a network called the Global Green Media Network. And there's a gentleman by the name of Hunter Vaughn who is an academic and research scholar, and his whole career has been around studying the implications of environment and media. So there are lots of kind of reports and studies that I think you can access on Global Green Media Network, and they're also keen on promoting environmental pedagogy within the student film school resources as well. So I highly recommend checking that out too, for some more resources.
Yeah, and I just saw Melissa in the chat. My alma mater, Columbia College Chicago, does also incorporate that into their studies. But I also think, Maria, if you're looking for that specifically in your program, like, it's an amazing opportunity for a practicum where you get to build that infrastructure, talk to a mentor, reach out to your department chair or a professor that you have a great relationship with. And if it doesn't exist, there's no reason you can't be the one that starts it.
Thank you, panel. And that's very interesting. And even from the Chicago Film Office standpoint, I mean, what's preventing us from putting a one sheet together? We're a film school heavy town. I mean, we deal with a lot of student filmmakers. So I know that old habits die hard. So everybody that's been doing it one way, it might be a little bit more challenging, but I know that we can do it together. But man, if we get ahead of it and start with training and education, I mean, then it just becomes habit and part of where no longer, like, you made a reference to a stunt metaphor. I mean, no longer is it, oh, we did this safe. Like, it just is, right? Nobody would think about doing it another way. I think that's all of the questions that we have. Oh, we do have one more that just came in. Is there anything that we can do about things like computers and technological waste? I know a lot of industries have standards in terms of keeping tech up to date. So there ends up being a lot of waste. So I know some of you touched on it a little bit, but I mean, I oftentimes am like, what do I do with this old laptop that's been sitting in my house collecting dust for 10 years? I feel kind of weird about throwing it in the garbage, or this, mason jar full of batteries. Like, what do I do with it?
You are not alone, John. There's a lot of people have a little bit of e-waste at home, and a lot of businesses have sometimes quite a bit. One of the things that we do on set, when we're on set doing the sustainability program, is we do an e-waste drive on every production, and we encourage the crew to bring their e-waste, their dead batteries, their hair dryers, their computers, all the stuff that's been sitting in their house that's not working right, to us, and then we partner with a certified e-waste recycling company, and it's important to do a little bit of research on because not all e-waste recyclers are created equal. So make sure that you get one that's been certified by a third party. I forget the certification. It's like it has an R in it, but anyway, there's one that we work with in California that's great, and I'd have to look into it for Chicago, but that's it is very important to keep that stuff out of landfill, and you got to be extra careful with like, for example, fluorescent bulbs, because they contain mercury, and when they just get smashed, you got to be very delicate with them. But certain retailers will take those. I know Home Depot takes them, and I don't know in every region. So you might not want to give those to the e-waste recycler, but everything else they'll take.
I think this is a great question, and just piggybacking off what Michael said, it's so important to keep things like computers out of landfills, both because of the risk for toxicity, and also there's really valuable materials that can be reused from electronics and other materials like that. In Chicago, the city runs a household chemical and computer recycling facility on Goose Island, which is open for residents to take any household hazardous waste like cleaning chemicals or things along those lines, as well as e-waste, to be both responsibly recycled and properly disposed. So that can be a great opportunity. And individual retailers of things like computers often have trade-in programs where you can increase the likelihood of those materials getting reused and potentially save money for new purchases as well.
And I would say, even thinking about it outside of just recycling those things, like where Heidi in the chat, she is with Big Delicious Planet, they donate their used cooking oil that then gets to fuel Loyola's shuttle buses and then is used for glycerin for their campus hand soap. So talk about using the full life of something. Like, think about ways if there's maybe a student that you can donate technology to, that you can extend the life of something rather than just responsibly recycling.
Definitely.
The sustainability industry sounds like it's really a creative industry. I mean, it certainly lends itself to that. It can be fun, and I hope folks can think about it being fun instead of a pain in the butt. And I also think that this is very exciting that the advertising industry is greening the bid, and that we're talking about this in the TV and film industry. Like Emily said, we're a microcosm of all industries. We waste in all industries. So if there's a beta trial that's successful in the TV and film industry and it's working in advertising, I mean, where's the limit? The sky's the limit. This could cross over into construction and all sorts of other industries, hopefully one day. We do not have any other questions queued up. Does anyone have any closing remarks or comments or fun facts before we close out this panel this afternoon?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm just going to say to reach out to everybody on this panel, reach out to your peers, your colleagues. Like, we're in this together. It's one common goal, and don't be afraid. Don't be limited by thinking that you need to know exactly what the next step is. Just take the step of the conversation and then plan the next action after that conversation. It really can be one bite at a time.
Excellent. and I love the TV film analogy. So like, everything starts with a script, right? You have nothing without a script. So, I mean, I feel like sustainability is like everything starts with the individual and everything is local. So, I mean, I've been recycling for years. I'm still probably don't know what I'm doing and recycling incorrectly, but I'm getting better, and I'm composting. My kids are doing it and having fun with it, teaching them from a young age. It's in the training and education. But is like plastic, can we recycle any kind of plastic before we close this out? Or like, what do we do if we don't have a compost service to pick up? I mean, what do we do with it? I have a compost bin sitting in my yard that's been frozen for the past 6 months. So, if you guys, just to close out, like, how do we know which or what we shouldn't recycle? Is there like something that everyone recycles that we should not be recycling, or a guide of some sort that we can also include in these show notes to give folks at home a little bit more of an idea of how they can start this and then bring this with them onto the set?
Sure. Recycle by City is a good resource that Chicago has, that has some great, very photo-focused guidance for Chicago-specific recycling parameters, and it can change municipality by municipality based on kind of waste haulers and recycling facility capabilities. One quick thing that I would just say is an often trouble area is plastic film and any sort of flexible film that you could punch a finger through. It often has a recycling logo on it, and it is recyclable, but not in your curbside bin. It needs to be dropped off at a location, which you can find online. A lot of grocery stores have drop-offs for plastic bags and other flexible plastic. So that's my parting quick tip.
Well, that's great, Megan. So Recycle by City is a great resource for any, questions we may have on a whim of what we can do to reduce our carbon footprint at home, and cross that over onto set or wherever else at work or wherever we may be.
Absolutely.
And I'd just like to say, one of my favorite sayings is, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So, to take whatever you've learned here today and start the journey, or continue your journey, enhance your journey. And we're here as a resource. So please reach out to any of us. We're happy to help you guys along.
Thank you all so much, panel. This couldn't have gone any better, in my opinion. Very excited about this, kicking this off with you all. And I hope to stay in touch with everybody as we move forward with this. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. Please keep tabs on the DCASE YouTube channel, and follow the Chicago Film Office playlist as well. And check our show notes next week. Reach out anytime if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.